be here today. Today we have a returning guest. The first time here in the live forum, but we did have a conversation a little bit over a year ago. Shannon Rollins. Shannon, how are you today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. So we want to get started here and have a conversation about mental health. And even though you've been a guest of mine back in the days when the podcast was audio only, can you take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself, and who are you, what do you do, and how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, so Shannon Rollins, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm located here in Lake Nona, and I help people a lot of times with anxiety relief, with nervous system regulation, with, as the topic we're talking about, some mental health things or challenges, life transitions that people may be going through using techniques like hypnosis, breathwork, and some other techniques as well that I use with my clients in the office or also with groups. And so, your one question of how I got into this. No one grows up saying I want to be a hypnotherapist and hypnotize people. You see the traditional pocket watches on shows like Netflix, or if you've ever been on a cruise ship and you've seen people yell sleep and then everyone falls over. So that's not necessarily in the way that I work. So with clinical hypnotherapy, what I like to help people with is changing their subconscious patterns and their subconscious belief systems that could be creating and fueling emotions like anxiety, fueling emotions like depression or other things. And I actually fell into hypnosis because I actually lost my stepbrother to suicide. And at the time, I didn't want to talk about it. I was like, I don't want to talk to anyone about this. Let me just go to someone. And I fell into Google, of
Dr.
course.
Google.
Dr. Google. And I'm like, well, what are some alternative approaches that can help me through something like this? And lo and behold, still my mentor today, who's located in Maitland, Renee, I always give her shout outs. She took me through a breathwork hypnosis journey. And I remember it was the most profound experience that I ever had in my entire life. And when I opened my eyes, I was like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And that afternoon, I went where did you go to school? I already had a background in health psychology. I had a master's from UF, and I really went there to help people change health behaviors, and it just wasn't doing it for me. I was like, what is that deep stuff that people are navigating that I can help them with? And I enrolled into school that day, and I knew that's exactly what I was supposed to be doing. So that's how I found my way to what I do now in my profession.
And how long have you been practicing?
About 6 years now.
6 years.
Yeah.
You said a couple of things there that are interesting, and evidently, the topic of mental health, it's thankfully more popular now than it was, say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was a kid. And it's good that we have more and more people talking about it, more and more professionals engaging with people, helping people. But it is a very broad spectrum. And along that spectrum, there's all kinds of vertical tools that people can use. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what you do is one of those tools that can be used to address some of these issues. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So can you expand a little bit there on what areas within the mental health spectrum do you try to focus on with your practice?
Yes, that's a great question. And I want to go back for a moment to the way that we're shifting the mental health conversation as well, because there's a lot of conversation out there, which is great. We're talking about it more. The stigma of there are many clients who come to me and they say, when I was a child, I didn't even know I had anxiety, or I didn't even know this was an issue, and now it's something that people are starting to speak more prevalently about. And so when we're talking in the mental health sphere and what's going on, there's certain and specific tools and techniques that are becoming more mainstream. That is a good thing, a positive thing, because sometimes, especially like in the 90s and the 2000s, we were almost like over-labeling and putting everyone into boxes, and and either over medicating and not really getting to the root. And even the somatics, we'll probably touch on that in a couple minutes as well. But with hypnosis, it's still a holistic tool and technique, and breathwork is still a holistic tool and technique that I personally feel is not only recommended, but could be a requirement when we're looking at different types of ways that someone can heal or begin the process of healing from a specific behavior or a specific trauma. Because what we're used to seeing is labels. I have PTSD, I have anxiety, I have depression, so it's I am. And that just denotes I can't get out of this. I can't get out of the problem because I am the thing. And then we're over-identifying with it when anyone can find those tools to navigate through it. So when even I feel like the conversation is shifting from mental health used to be labels, and now it's starting to turn into, which I love, nervous system dysregulation. Mental health is sleep issues, not getting enough sleep. Mental health is not processing emotions properly. So we're starting to change the conversation around the I have this to this is something that I'm experiencing, and then we can do more with it. We kind of know what more to focus on and what to shift into with that.
It's interesting. It's almost like, and again, please keep me honest, correct me if I go rogue here, but it seems like we're experiencing in the field of mental health what maybe in the field of medicine started to happen maybe 15, 20 years ago, where the idea of personalized medicine, of looking at the individual, looking what's going on physiologically, somatically, and trying to now to where today you can actually walk into specific clinics and they'll evaluate you as an individual because there's no two of you, right? And even though you may be experiencing diabetes, you're not experiencing diabetes the exact same way as everyone else.
Yes.
Right? Because your body is unique. And it seems from what you're saying that when it comes to mental health, we're taking those same steps. Number one, acknowledging the fact that having liver disease and having, something that you're experiencing with your mind or within the domain of mental health are not necessarily that different. You still experience these things, number one. And number two, how you experience them is completely unique when compared to other people who could be experiencing the same thing.
Yes.
Am I on the right track here?
You are not rogue at all.
Great. I like that.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the word that you said, somatically, because that's another way or another term that's becoming more mainstream, which I also think is a positive thing with the internet right now and with TikTok and with Instagram, is that we're starting to mainstream some of these therapy type terms. And soma just is a Greek word that means of the body and of the body. And so this goes back to Dr. Peter Levine's research on the somatics, somatic experiencing. And now we're starting to see coaches and I with breathwork and hypnosis and even NLP, those are all somatic tools. And all that means is when we are not processing our emotions properly from a very, very young age, then it can get stuffed or stored in the body. And no one wakes up, especially in the 90s, 2000s, says, some people do, but I'm going to teach my children how to process their emotions properly today. It just wasn't really a thing that happened. And so we are neurologically linking present day experiences to past pains. And so if we're not able to learn to process and release any trapped emotion that could be trapped in the soma, in the body, that's where somatics comes into play, because something could happen today that triggers you or triggers me, and then my body gives a response. And so that just goes back to your point of we are starting to see now that everything is interconnected and linked. It's not just the mind and it's not just the body. As a hypnotherapist, I've been so used to saying the word the subconscious mind, the subconscious mind, the subconscious mind, which still is a subconscious mind, but it's really the nervous system. Like, I've really started shifting even my language to the way that I see the back of the mind, to how is your nervous system responding to a certain thing that's happening every single day.
You find that when you talk to your patients, to your clients about the mind, about the subconscious mind, that they get a feeling that it's something that's happening just up here versus all around. There's a paper that I'm sure you're familiar with, very popular paper about 30 years ago, 20 years ago, Charles Nelson Clark, about the extended mind. And the big question was, where does the mind begin and the rest of the world? Where does the mind end and the rest of the world begins, right? And the whole idea that the mind is not up here, but it's actually embodied, which is what Dan Siegel talks about at UCLA also, is an embodied process, right? So it involves your organs, it involves your brain, obviously, but it also involves the things you interact with, the sounds you're experiencing, your ecosystem. Do you find that more and more people are maybe getting on board with that, or is that still seem like a foreign woo-woo type of conversation?
Ooh, it's one woo, not two woos.
Not two woos,
We're
just
halfway
one.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of that's a good question, because I see a bit of both, and many people, by the time they come to something like hypnotherapy, it's really like an out-of-the-box type of experience to have, which it's very normalized. It's just like going into a deep meditation. Essentially, we're just going into those relaxed brain waves so they can become more connected. But there's something that I call felt sense, that's called felt sense out in the community. And really at the beginning of a session, when we're talking about someone's issue, I have them start to connect with their body and see how their body is responding to the emotions and even the belief systems that are connected to what's going on. And some people only feel it in their mind.
Okay.
Overthinking, racing thoughts. And some people only feel it in their body. And so both are present, but there's some of it that's unconscious. I think that we're getting there, and sometimes it's very hard for someone to connect with their body when it feels unsafe. So my goal is to help someone in that setting move into a place of safety so they can start feeling again, because it can be uncomfortable and very uncomfortable, and I can't remember what author talks about this or says it. You may have even mentioned in the past, but we're addicted to being led away from discomfort. Like, of course, we're chasing dopamine, we're doom scrolling, we're finding behaviors that can really be quick fixes, which even the word distractions in the title of this podcast is we're doing everything we can to avoid discomfort. And sometimes the body just wants to speak to us and be uncomfortable so it could start to process and release and move forward. So long story short, to answer your question, yes, people are moving in that direction. And sometimes, especially if someone's experienced like a really big trauma or event in their life, it's going to take time for their body to actually feel safe again and to feel comfortable again. Feeling.
You mentioned something interesting right at the beginning that I want to go back to, and then tie that up with what you just said, that you work with people to address their beliefs. Right? And beliefs is one of these words that is such a powerful word, because it actually means a lot more than what people give it credit. And you talk about beliefs, and immediately people think of religion or spirituality, but it actually, even in the field of neuroscience, it has an extended meaning. Like your prior beliefs, what your mind or your brain is actually fine-tuned to use as part of its prediction model, right? And that's a key thing, right? That the brain, most of us, or most people think that we're reactive beings. But in reality, we are predictive beings. The brain is a predictive organ. It's predicting the present moment based on a known past and evaluating all the inputs that we have, that we're experiencing in the moment. So when it comes to reality, it's basically a construction, a controlled hallucination.
Yep.
What we think is real is actually the brain's interpretation of everything we're sensing through the senses,
Yep.
plus what the gut is evaluating through its neurons, 500 million that it has, plus the known past. And the brain favors the known past over the present stimulus we're seeing. That's why we see optical illusions, right? So there's this completely different definition of the word belief when it comes to psychosomatic, neurology, neuroscience type of lingo versus the everyday lingo. Is that something that you feel like you have to tell your clients in order to start making some headway, or do you just use other tools?
Oh boy, this is a loaded question, because if I could go across the street and get my whiteboard and I'd bring it right back here and say what I do with every single client, I actually explain that to every single client at the beginning. So when and yes, we favor the past. We do. And that's even why if there's an uncertain event in life, in an uncertain thing that's happening in the future, that's why we feel so much emotion, because we actually have nothing to compare it to. Even if it's an exciting new thing, it could be really disgruntling to the body. And so the way that I describe it is, if we have a timeline of our life and we come in, when I say relatively clean slate, it really depends what happens in the womb as well, because a lot can happen in the womb with mom. The baby is forming its nervous system around the mom's nervous system and how the mom's feeling as well. And so when we come into the world, we're relatively clean slate, and we're just starting to experience everything for the first time, and we don't know better, and we're like, oh, I got pushed on the playground. Oh, wait a minute. What does that mean about me? And then we start creating beliefs, and a belief is just a thought that we think about ourselves, and then we reinforce it with another event, and then we reinforce it again, and then we reinforce it again, and then it's an instilled belief. And then what will happen is we start experiencing life through the lens of that belief system. And I'm not saying necessarily that we're attracting the thing, but we're seeing it through the lens, which means that every experience there on out, we're looking through the lens of I'm not enough, or I'm always last place, or I don't make enough money, so I don't deserve to have this. And that's when we start to see, and that's where the nervous system and the body starts responding to it as well. So yes, absolutely. And the reason why also that we experience this at such a young age, not only is because we're experiencing it for the first time, but also because our brain waves are more relaxed when we're children. We're naturally in hypnotic states when we're children, when we're babies moving up to toddlers. And that's why always the research saying like up to 7. I even say up to 10 if someone's experiencing unless it's like a really big experience that someone has, like a really bad car accident at 15. Yeah, that's older than the age, but relatively those are the age ranges where we're starting to shape the world. And so to your point, I probably wake up every morning and I say to myself, is this even real? Where am I? So.
Yeah, no, and it's a very powerful and sobering thought experiment. And I want to bring that back to something that you said a little bit later. So we have on one hand these beliefs, or in neuroscience, they call them priors. Right? So you have this model of the world that is built in your brain, and then the brain observes everything through that model, through the senses, right?
Yeah.
And what we don't know is that the same way I can have optical illusions, because the brain is expecting something and something else is not adding up. So I can see an optical illusion or an auditory illusion. I can also have an emotional illusion, right? Because the same mechanism that the brain uses to process optical and sensory illusions is the exact same process that it's going to use to process what's coming from the gut feeling. So the gut's not infallible.
Yeah.
It will make mistakes, right? So you have all this stuff, and the brain is going to favor the model, right? But that is changeable. And the way to change it is to be uncomfortable, right? Is to actually do that makes you uncomfortable. The brain's going to see that and process as an error. I don't like it, but then you do it again. I don't like it, but then you do it again. And then you do that enough, and it's like going to the gym. At first you start lifting and it hurts, and then it keeps hurting, and then eventually you get stronger. Do you agree with that approach? I mean, is that how you bring it together with your clients?
Yeah, I always say that sometimes things have to be felt to let them go. Not always. I have some clients who, and this is kind of, this is where it gets in the conversation, and this is just what I see with my clients, is when we talk about root cause work, like you have to go to the root of the problem. I do that a lot with my clients. I still do that because I see a ton of success with, it's called regression work in hypnosis, like a hypnotic childhood regression, where we're going back not to the root of a symptom, like someone's experiencing, but the root of the emotions and the beliefs. Where did this come from? And how did it turn into this? Because it's just a stacking effect, every experience we're having. And this is where, someone will, and actually I think we talked about this on the last podcast, the Anxiety RX book, and he talks about even panic attacks and how, and I wholeheartely agree with this, is that people will come in and they say panic attacks are coming out of nowhere, but they're really not coming out of nowhere, they're coming out of somewhere. What the way that I like to describe it is the body has suppressed so much that it's like an avalanche coming out, that it just has no choice but to let go. And what will happen is the body likes to do it at the most inopportune times. It's when you're in the car, when you're at work, in the middle of a meeting. Like it doesn't like to choose the best times to do this. And the nervous system and the mind is really meant to keep you alive. It's not meant to make you happy. This is something that I don't want to say we've created, but this is something we're survival creatures, and our brain is still operating on an old model. So now we're seeing things like AI, we're seeing social media, we're seeing cars, this entire building. We're not used to this, technically. This is not something that the brain is necessarily designed for. So when we're seeing all this stimulation, like a light here, and all of these, so the scrolling. I think I read a statistic the other day that it was 144 times a day that we check our phone. Do you check your phone? Do you do it?
Yeah,
check your phone?
yeah.
we all. Well, because we have no choice, right? The system requires us to check our phone that many times. And so when we're that overstimulated, I always like to say we're overstimulated, we're overthinking, and we're underfeeling. Because we're not, how are we able to how many times do we check in with ourselves? If we're checking our phone 144 times a day, I'm sure it's more, I don't know, you'll have to fact check me on that, but it's a lot. If we're checking it that many times, how much time do we have to pause? And back to the discomfort that you were describing, if we pause and we feel the discomfort, if someone doesn't have the right support, it can feel like a lot for people.